Welcome, everybody, to this week's version of The Bottom Line. Well, we're back at it after another crazy week of football. Andre Johnson goes down, marking the third straight week. A big-time fantasy player goes down after Jamal Charles, Kenny Britt. Luckily for Johnson owners, not too serious. Looks like 3 weeks, not all year, so that's the best you can hope for with that injury because it looked pretty bad on the field. But that's fantasy football. You know, it's interesting because in the league I'm in, some teams who look really good are struggling. Some teams who are starting Mike Sims Walker and Chad Ochocinco are 3-1. That's the luck of the draw, but in the end, the cream will rise to the top. So let's look this week. We've got a couple of guys going up, a couple guys going down, some sneaky starts, and then my final word. Going up, Ryan Terrain. Now, this is an interesting story. Now, Saturday night, I'm sitting there and I see that Mike Shanahan said a week earlier he thought about benching Hightower for Terrain. Now, that got me thinking that the Redskins are playing a terrible Rams team. Terrain might get in and get some carries. This could be the week maybe to get Terrain. So Saturday I'm sitting there and I'm about to pick up Ryan Terrain and drop Pierre Thomas. But the last second I decide not to. And what happens? Terrain not only gets some carries against the Rams, he explodes. So obviously I couldn't get him the following week as I had the fourth waiver wire pick and it wasn't good enough to get him. But it's an interesting situation in Washington. I've been a Tim Hightower fan ever since he was in college. I thought he could be a feature back. I was wrong. The guy can't do it. He got his opportunity this year in Washington. He's dancing behind the line. The thing that's interesting to me with Hightower is you can say, oh, it's the preseason when it comes to results sometimes and defense is not game planning for people, but Hightower was running with determination. He was running hard in the preseason. Then the regular season starts, and all of a sudden he's dancing behind the line. That tells me he's not a money player. You know what he is? He's a bit player. He's a role player. That's what he's best suited for. So it's still a mess in Washington. You know, Hightower, they like the way he does blitz pickup. So basically when Hightower's in the game, you probably know they're going to pass. But at this point, Terrain is the guy to have in Washington. Halu's still going to be the change of pace back. But Shanahan's still not confident with him taking over the reins yet. I think in the long term, Halu's the guy you want. I mean, Terrain, listen, that guy sneezes, he can pull something. So it's not guaranteed that Terrain is going to be the running back there all season. But for right now, Ryan Terrain, he's the guy to get in Washington. Another guy I have going up this week is based on emails I got. It's Brandon Pettigrew, tight end with the Lions. He's the tight end I talked about this summer. I was targeting in all my leagues. I actually didn't get him in my 3 leagues, but this week I traded for him in 2 of them. To me, Pettigrew is an absolute monster. But what surprised me were people were emailing me last week asking, Brandon Pettigrew's on the waiver wire. Should I go get him? Well, he ranks 3rd in receptions and tight ends. So what he's doing on the waiver wire, I have no idea. The guy's a monster. The only thing preventing him from being an absolute fantasy stud is he needs to score more. And I think that'll come. With teams trying to take Calvin Johnson out of the game, I think in the coming weeks you'll see Pettigrew get in the end zone more. But this guy has 22 receptions on the season. That offense is loaded. They can't run the football. So Pettigrew is going to be a big time receiving tight end. There's only one problem with Pettigrew that actually hurts him. He's a good run blocker. He did a lot of run blocking at Oklahoma State. They ran the ball a ton. So they use him to run block quite a bit. The good news is they can't run the ball. So I think as the year goes on, even though the Lions' defense is improving, they get a lot of sacks, I think you're going to see him in more shootouts than not. Brandon Pettigrew, to me, right now, if you want to go get a tight end that's going to be a stud for you the rest of the year, go get Brandon Pettigrew. Okay, I got a couple receivers going down this week. First, let's go to an oldie but a goodie, Hines Ward. You know, Ward's had a great career. He's been a great NFL player, a great fantasy player. But I get emails all the time saying, who should I start? And a lot of times, Hines Ward is in the conversation. Just so you know, you should never be starting Hines Ward. I'm not even sure he should be on your fantasy team. But like I said, the guy starting Chad Ochocinco and Mike Sims Walker in my league starts Hines Ward, and he's 3-1, so I guess you never know. But personally, for me, I wouldn't even consider starting Hines Ward. There's got to be a guy on your waiver wire who has a better shot of starting and putting up more fantasy points right now than Hines Ward. The Steelers in general are kind of a mess. Their offensive line is a joke. They can't block anybody. Big Ben's getting killed. I mean, if he wasn't the toughest guy in the league, he'd already be out for the season. So God only knows how much longer he has to go, but you basically got to kill him to get him out of there. Mendenhall's hurt. I think, as I said this summer, Antonio Brown, that's the guy you want other than Mike Wallace in Pittsburgh. I think he has the most upside. right now, Hines Ward, just not a fantasy option. My other guy going down, I've been waiting to kill this guy. I just wanted to make sure I was right, and I think I am. Mario Manningham. You know, all these fantasy big shots, they were all telling me about Manningham. My idiot cousin, who's a huge Giants fan, but just goes to show he doesn't understand football, is arguing with me all summer saying Manningham's going to catch 80 balls. In my opinion, Mario Manningham is one of the worst starting receivers in the NFL. The only guy I think that might be worse is Bernard Berrien, although according to his recent Twitter activity, he's always open. 2 catches for 37 yards on the season. But, I guess all the quarterbacks are just missing him. But to me, Manningham is the same kind of player. He's not Steve Smith. He's not going to catch a ton of balls. He's a deep threat. That's basically what Manningham does. And as far as route running goes, he's as bad as they come. He's a terrible route runner. There isn't a game where Eli Manning isn't yelling at him for being in the wrong spot. I read an article from a New York writer that he was personally responsible for 5 of Manning's interceptions last year for just not being in the right spot at the right time. So what happens this past Sunday? Once again, Manningham's running the wrong routes. Eli's finally had enough of it. They pull him. They put in Victor Cruz, who's been doing a great job the past 2 weeks. So Giant coaches are trying to tell you, Manningham's still the starter. That's great in theory, but as the game goes on, I think Victor Cruz is going to get more of the action. If you can't run good routes and you can't catch, you're not going to be a great NFL receiver, Bernard Berrien. You want to show somebody your films? I'll be happy to come by and watch them with you. You want to fly me to Minnesota? I'll watch all the games with you, Bernard, through your whole career. We'll go back to college. I have no problems with that because when guys can't run routes and they can't catch, they're not going to produce. That's Mario Manningham. That's Bernard Berrien, the same kind of player. So if you drafted Bernard Berrien in the 4th or 5th round, some of these fantasy writers told you to do so, you were misguided. You were given bad advice because he's not that kind of receiver. Look for Victor Cruz to get more action in New York. I like him going forward more than Manningham. All right, now let's get to the sneaky starts. I got a couple guys I really like in the sneaky starts, and one of them, nice segue, Victor Cruz. The Giants are playing Seattle this week. Seattle has a terrible secondary. Look what Atlanta did to them last week. Julio Jones had a big game. I think they're going to try to take Hakeem Nicks away and leave one-on-one coverage with Cruz. I think Cruz has a big game. I have both Cruz and Nicks, and I'm obviously starting Nicks, but I really wouldn't be surprised if Victor Cruz ends up having the better day. I know Manningham will get some run, but again, I just don't see him being the answer there. I like Victor Cruz this week. If you're looking for a flex play, I think he's the guy. Someone else I haven't been happy with so far this season is Mark Ingram. I've been kind of holding back on him because I liked him coming out of college. He's been scoring here and there to save fantasy owners, but really he looks like crap running the ball behind that Saints line. If anything, Pierre Thomas looks like the better runner to me. But they're committed to Ingram. They're giving him the carries over Thomas, and there ain't a worse run defense in the NFL right now than the Carolina Panthers. They're just absolutely abysmal. They can't stop anybody on the ground. So this week, I own Drew Brees, I own Colston, I own Meacham, and I'm a little worried because I think they're going to give Ingram the ball quite a bit, and I don't see any way the Panthers can stop him. So I get a lot of questions about Ingram. People are, they're starting him as a flex play. I'm kind of borderline on him, but right this week, I think this is the week he has his big game. I think you're looking at 100 yards and at least one score out of Mark Ingram. And for my final word this week, I'm going to get into a little bit of fantasy strategy. One of the things people ask me a lot is what they should do if they have 2 good quarterbacks. This can even go to tight ends or any other position. Running backs and receivers you kind of want to accumulate, but you should never have 2 great quarterbacks on your roster for more than a couple weeks. It's an absolute waste of time. Now, there's 2 quarterbacks I've been seeing on a lot of people's rosters based on how they drafted or who they picked up. That's Stafford and Cam Newton. Because Stafford went later on in drafts, so some people took a Rodgers or a Breeze early and ended up with Stafford as their backup. And obviously Newton was picked up after the season, so a lot of people have a Rodgers, Breeze, Brady, and Cam Newton. You got to trade Stafford or Newton. That's how you play fantasy football. You don't hoard those guys on your bench and hope in case Brady or Breeze gets hurt. Those guys by the numbers aren't going to get hurt. And if they do, then you'll do something when that time comes. You're not going to rotate quarterbacks. If you have Rodgers, Breeze, Brady, they start every week, hands down, regardless, doesn't matter what the matchup is. Because if you're looking at Breeze and Stafford and you have both of them and you're trying to play the matchup, it's going to drive you insane because whoever you put on the bench is probably going to go for 350 and 3 scores every week. So get rid of the headache. what you want to do there is you want to get a stud receiver, you want to get a stud running back, because someone else is going to need a quarterback. It's great to have depth on your team, but one thing I'm seeing a lot because of the Cam Newton thing and Matthew Stafford is people are carrying two great quarterbacks. No good. I mean, if you're carrying two great quarterbacks and one of your starting running backs is Sean Green, that's a problem. Move one of those quarterbacks, get yourself another position player. Be active. It's fantasy football. It's a game. Have some fun with it. Don't draft a team and sit on it all stinking year. You know what? If you win at the end, big deal. What do? Say hooray to yourself in your living room? Have some fun with playing fantasy football. Don't worry about November, December. I love in the summer when people are saying, well, hey, Arian Foster, look who he has in week 15 or in 16. You haven't seen anybody play yet. How do you know those defenses are going to be bad or good? You don't know anything yet. You start doing that in October. Now we know Carolina can't stop the run. So if your running back's playing Carolina in week 15 or 16, you have something. But before the season, that stuff's meaningless. Just have fun. Make some deals, make some trades. If you're carrying Cam Newton and another stud, move Newton for a skill position player. That's the way to play fantasy football. And remember, you can follow me on Twitter. The production people will put it right down there on the screen. Thomas Casale. What is it? Twitter.com/Thomas Casale. I don't know what it is. Just they'll have it on the screen for you. And you can email me with any fantasy football questions you might have. That's tcasale@mail.com. Keep the questions coming. I respond to every email. Thanks for joining me this week. I'll see you next week on The Bottom Line.